You are watching CBS News' continuing coverage of Showdown in the Gulf. From CBS News headquarters in New York, here are Paula Zahn and Harry Smith.
And good morning, everybody.
Let's get right down to the headlines. Here are the headlines at this hour. Allied troops and leaders prepare for the war on the ground. Saudi Arabia says it will not be drawn into a war against Israel. And the Soviets say they have a plan to end the fighting. The U.S. commander in the Gulf this morning gave a glowing account of Allied air accuracy. General Norman Schwarzkopf said the pilots are flying 2,000 sorties a day with 80% accuracy. And he said the troops are getting ready for the ground war to come. When the ground war does come, Marine Corps Harrier jump jets will supply close cover for advancing infantry and armor. The British-designed planes can hover like a helicopter and carry a range of weaponry, including 500-pound bombs. A crew with the British news agency ITN smuggled these pictures out of Baghdad, taken 2 nights ago. They show incoming explosives and anti-aircraft fire on the first night of the war. A member of the crew talked about that night with Dan Rather.
The hotel itself that we were filming from is actually smack bang in the middle of a military area, but just 1 kilometre away from it is a military airfield, and the Ministry of Defence, which was hit 3 times, is just about half a kilometre away, so the precision bombing or precision missiling was absolutely spot on.
Last night, Tel Aviv, Haifa, and other Israeli cities were hit by 7 Iraqi Scud missiles. They carried conventional warheads, not chemical weapons. The Israelis have yet to say if they will retaliate, but Saudi Arabia says it will not be drawn into a war it doesn't want, even if Israel strikes back. In Cairo, the Egyptian cabinet is meeting to decide its own response, and the Soviets say they have a plan to end the war, which they will unveil at the United Nations. No word on just what that plan may include. Paula?
And right now we're going to go to Bill Plant, who is standing by at the State Department for the latest. Good morning, Bill.
Good morning to you, Paula. There was a lot of activity around here last night after those Scud missiles hit because it placed into question the whole basis of America's relations with its Arab coalition partners. It was obvious to the State Department that Saddam Hussein was trying to draw Israel into the war. Secretary of State Baker last night got on the phone and talked to the ambassadors of Saudi Arabia and Egypt and Israel, and eventually the Secretary of State wound up talking to the Prime Minister of Israel, and he asked him not to retaliate, to allow the United States and the coalition forces to retaliate rather than having Israel do it herself. The Prime Minister told Baker that while he appreciated what he was saying, Israel had to retain the right to judge what was in its own best interests and to retaliate. In other words, the Israelis made no promise that they would not do so. They have not done so. The Israelis are very nervous about the idea that they should wait for a second night to see if anything happens. Somebody described that to me, in fact, as ludicrous. So no one in the U.S. government is yet certain what the Israelis will do. But I think it's probably worth noting that there are many ways to retaliate. One doesn't have to bomb Baghdad. The retaliation, if it's bombing, could be limited to the outskirts, the western area where presumably those Scud missiles were launched. There are many options. People both in this government and I think in the Israeli government understand that. But the question is still very much up in the air. Now, as to what might happen with America's Arab coalition partners, all I can tell you is that the Secretary of State, when he came away from the Middle East last week, came away with an understanding which holds that if Israel has to retaliate for an attack upon itself, the Arab partners will not leave the coalition. Making that stick, making that hold, is something else. Now, of course, we've just heard, as you reported in the headlines, that the Saudis have said that they are not going to leave the coalition over Israel. And the U.S. hope, of course, is that that will extend to the other members as well. But it's much more difficult, for example, for Syria to maintain that position.
Bill, we don't have a whole lot of time left, but we also reported the Soviets now say they have some kind of plan they're going to unveil before the United Nations. Do you know anything about the prospect of this peace plan?
No, and I think it'll be news here in the State Department building as well, so we'll have to wait and see.
What does that tell us then?
Well, it tells us that the Soviets would like very much for this war to be over. for the military conflict to be over. It's not in their interests as they perceive them, even though they're not part of the multinational force, for that conflict to continue, and they'd like to get it to end.
Bill Plant, thank you very much. And right now, we're going to turn our attention to Alan Pizzi, who is standing by in Amman, Jordan. Apparently, Alan is not ready. We're going to go someplace else now.
All right, we're going to go back down to Washington right now and check in with the Senate Minority Whip, Senator Alan Simpson of Wyoming. Senator Simpson, can you hear me all right?
Surely do, you bet.
Thanks very much for taking the time to chat with us.
Pleasure.
Incredible pressure on Israel today to stay out of this conflict. There are great fears in Israel, even as we speak, that there may be another Scud missile attack tonight. Do you think Israel can be kept at bay? Do you think they can be kept out?
I think they can if we'll quit talking about it. All I hear is, will Israel retaliate? Will they retaliate? And finally, you'll have a self-serving prophecy. I've never seen quite such intensity about one thing, especially while the sorties and the sorties are going on, and we're knocking the Iraqis in extraordinary ways. We will take out these Scud mobile missile systems. That is what has happened during the night. If all goes well and continues to go as we are told through our intelligence and our briefings, this awesome, and it is a stunning kind of activity. All you have to do is look at it and see it on a chart. When you know that in one day more sorties were flown than were flown over Hanoi in 2 weeks, that they will find those particular Scud systems, and the Israelis will be patient with us, as we probably got a lot of them last night. So if we can just tone down the rhetoric in the United States through the media, we'll be a lot better off on Israel.
I guess the question remains, though, that Israel trusted us to protect their interest. Some of those missiles did get through last night, and even if they don't hear the pressure from the United States, certainly there's pressure within Israel for some sort of response.
No one knows better about Israel than Israel. No one in the United States will ever know the intensity and the security level and the alert level of the Israeli people. They know exactly what they're doing, and they will do it well if they don't get just knocked and keep haggle. I've never seen anything like it.
Yesterday, Secretary of Defense Dick Cheney came out, and during his briefing was emphasizing that we need to take a cautionary tone to all that goes on over there. We have seen dramatic successes. Do you think as a rule we've taken the right tone toward all of this, and are you optimistic at all or pessimistic with regard to how long this might all last?
I think the hostilities will go on for several days. The war will go on longer. I know that sounds like a strange statement, but you can be in a situation of war and not have hostility. We couldn't be more pleased as to what we've seen. As the Senate yesterday in a top secret briefing was told hour by hour as to what had occurred and how it had been delivered and how 5 million tons of ordnance had been delivered into this country, there was just a silence. Every system was in optimum working condition. Every fighter, every soldier, every airman, every airwoman, everything working. That isn't a sense of euphoria, it is a sense of reality. And then the attrition will go on. The aircraft of Iraq cannot get up. They can't get into their bunkers. We'll seal those. And when you can put a 2,000-pound bomb in a skylight with imagery that's done for 2 or 3 months in training, they don't know that. We built this stuff to take on the evil empire, and Iraq is far from that in terms of return capability. This stuff was built to defend us and use with the Soviet Union.
With the Soviet Union, right.
Sure.
Yesterday, in one of the moments at which the President talked to the press a little bit, he took a pretty somber tone, and he mentioned the idea of prayer and the solace that might be able to be found there for people who are worried about our men and women over there, and certainly the weight of the decision to go in had to weigh heavy on him. The results of many polls around the country show overwhelming support for the president. He must be reassured by that kind of support that he's getting from the American people, wouldn't you think?
I have spoken to him last night. I've never heard him more calm, more directed, more stable in what he has done and knew what he had to do. And I say that he and Barbara Bush, when they say to people in this land, and we have great respect for them both, when they say your prayers are important, that's not corny. It is a time for prayer, and our thoughts and prayers go winging out to these people, and this is the finest, these young people who are carrying our flag on their shoulder are doing a magnificent job, and they deserve our total support. Whether you like it or not, they deserve to know that you care about them, and the best way to care about them for us as congressmen is to furnish them every single thing they need to get the job done and get the hell home.
Senator Alan Simpson, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today.
And our coverage will continue right after this.
The same medicine found in the prescription drug Motrin.
The same medicine found in the prescription drug Motrin.
Same as in Motrin in non-prescription strength.
The same medicine found in the prescription.
Did you ever notice that a lot of pain relievers seem to be saying the same thing? Well, if you want the same medicine found in the prescription drug Motrin, wouldn't it just be simpler to ask for Motrin IB? Non-prescription strength Motrin IB. You can't buy a more effective pain reliever without a prescription. Motrin IB. Accept no alternatives.
Does dry skin itch? Won't anything stop it fast?
Lanacane will. Lanacane shuts off the itch like a switch, fast. Only Lanacane cream works on contact with the nerves that cause dry skin itch. Look, Vaseline Intensive Care can't. Jergens can't. These can't. And Lanacane Deep moisturizes too. Helps heal rough, dry skin. For dry skin itch, every itch.
Lanacane does shut off the itch like a switch, fast.
What's good on toast? Nope, cholesterol. Calories. Nah, fat. Soupy? Yeah.
Soupy honey, the good taste that's good for you.
You're being introduced, cameras on, ready?
I can't go out there, my lips are so dry.
Here, Blistex helps relieve dry lips fast. Blistex is the only leading product that actually contains moisture to relieve dryness fast.
You're on.
Blistex works fast.
Our coverage of Operation Desert Storm continues now. We're going to check in with Alan Pizzi, who is in Amman, Jordan at the moment. Good evening there. Good morning here. Alan, for those of us that didn't have the benefit to stay up with you all Wednesday night, can you describe to us what you saw when you were still in Baghdad?
Well, the first thing that happened was we didn't see anything. We heard it. We heard the explosions and the anti-aircraft fire. I looked out the windows, and there was a tremendous display up there for us. Red and orange tracer bullets, sparkling flashes in the sky, flashes from the ground, fireballs going in the air. The anti-aircraft fire was tremendous. I must say that nobody that I spoke to actually saw an aircraft. We didn't even really hear an aircraft. We heard sounds that might have been, but mostly we heard anti-aircraft fire booming and banging and crashing in all directions of the sky. They seem to be firing at their own imaginations. I think the fire was going everywhere. It didn't seem to be directed at anything. It just crashed and smashed and arced everywhere.
Did you have any forewarning that any of this was coming your way?
Yes, we did. We were tipped off by our front offices that it would come sooner rather than later. We obviously had no exact time. And a few minutes before it happened, there were a lot of reporters standing around in the CBS office debating when we thought it would actually happen. A couple of people said, well, between 2 and 3, and other people said, no, we're hearing bad weather, it won't happen tonight, maybe it'll happen before dawn. And we were still discussing it basically when it happened.
And now, of course, you're out of Iraq. Can you describe to us how you got out of the country?
Yeah, we scrounged around until we managed to find a couple of taxis that would take us. We managed to get exit visas from the Deputy Minister of Information, who came to the hotel where all the journalists were kept, and was giving a long, rambling diatribe, which he said was an open letter to President Bush, but
wasn't very coherent to us. And we said, well, we'd really like some exit visas. And he said, yeah, take them if you want. And right there in the coffee shop, they filled out exit visas for anyone who wanted them. So once we found the taxi, found extra gas, we formed up little convoys and headed off towards Jordan. We got, about 9 o'clock at night, Iraq time. We stopped for gasoline in the dark at a little tiny town, and suddenly the soldiers over there began screaming, lights out, move the cars away from the pumps, and then woof, they hit again. It was supposed to be the Al-Walid air base, which was nearby, said to be the biggest air base in western Iraq. They pounded that. The horizon lit up like it does with sheet lightning during a heavy storm, and the sky was filled with tracers, missiles, flak exploding high in the sky. We heard explosions for about a half an hour. The anti-aircraft fire went on for an hour, and then there was an all-clear sound on an air raid siren. Significantly, none of us heard an air raid siren warning, but we did hear an all-clear. So after a while, we moved out, got down the road a ways, and they came back again, and they got what we were told was a chemical plant. That was awesome. Huge orange fireball went up, and more anti-aircraft fire than I have ever seen in my life. It was just amazing. It was all around us. We were in the middle of it. It was firing everywhere into the sky. And the bad part was that we didn't think the Americans or whoever was up there were going to hit us. They'd been doing so well that we were pretty confident. But the shrapnel from the spent rounds and anti-aircraft started falling on the highway around us. We couldn't go anywhere because we couldn't drive in the dark, and except for those flashes, it was a pitch black night. And we couldn't put our lights on because we thought if we do that, some character on an anti-aircraft gun's going to see the lights and decide he'll shoot at that. So we just had to sit there, and the attitude is sort of, beam me up, Scotty. This is no place for Mrs. Pizzy's little boy, but Scotty wasn't there, so we just sat it out and made it to the border, which was closed, so we spent the night in the back of a car, freezing, and got through this morning and made it to Amman.
I know you described that most of your trip was done in the darkness. Did you see any evidence of the Iraqi military as you made your exodus?
Yes, we did. 2 incidents. About 100 miles out of Baghdad, we saw 2 Iraqi jets. We knew they were Iraqi because they were flying low and slow, doing lazy turns over the highway, and we knew that the Allied forces wouldn't be doing that. All of a sudden, they split apart. One dove to the ground and leveled out just at ground level. He was so close, I wouldn't want to have been in that plane. And there was a great explosion and flash right behind him, and we saw the plane sort of waver like that from the concussion, and then he just disappeared. And we looked up high in the sky were 2 vapor trails flying side by side. We couldn't see the planes, but we could see the vapor trails, and the only thing we could figure what it was a combat air patrol that had spotted the Iraqis, and they'd managed to evade the missiles. And just after that, we passed a convoy of Iraqi military. There were 3 mobile launchers with missiles on them. Someone we were with that has knowledge of these things said he thought they were SS-20s, small Scuds. They were heading towards Jordan, but as far as we could tell, they turned off the main highway at the turnoff to head down towards the Saudi Arabian border. They were accompanied by some other vehicles that had Strela, SAM-2 surface-to-air heat-seeking missile racks on the back of them. And we saw a few jeeps, truckloads of soldiers, and a few truckloads of sort of grubby-looking soldiers heading back towards Baghdad. Apart from that, nothing. No roadblocks, no checkpoints, nothing. And a lot of anti-aircraft fire, that we saw.
Alan Pizzy, thank you so much. Glad you're there safely in Amman. I think Alan deserves a break, perhaps a bath, and maybe even a warm meal. And
an opportunity to call home and let everybody
know that he is okay.
We want to update you a little bit on some of the headlines that have come our way in the last little while. We'll try to brief you up on these headlines every 15 minutes or so. A downed U.S. pilot reportedly has been captured by Iraq. Allied air losses in the war are put at 7, including 3 American planes. For now, at least, Israel holds off on retaliation for Iraqi missile attacks. And the BBC says Saddam Hussein's family has fled Iraq. The Reuters news service is quoting an eyewitness in Iraq as saying Iraqi military police captured a downed American pilot. They're said to have commandeered a Baghdad taxicab to take the prisoner away. There is no independent confirmation of that story right now. Also this morning, the U.S. appears to have gotten what it wants from Israel. Restraint. 7 Iraqi Scud missiles slammed into Israeli civilian targets last night, prompting fears that Israel would retaliate and perhaps disrupt the fragile Allied coalition. The Defense Department released video this morning of U.S. pinpoint bomb attacks from Wednesday night. The 2,000-pound laser-guided smart bombs hit with amazing precision. And there are unconfirmed reports today that Allied forces are hitting new targets in downtown Baghdad. Those are some of our headlines, at least up to this moment.
We've talked an awful lot over the last couple of weeks about the role that reservists play in all this, and right now we're going to go down to Washington to talk with Colonel Benjamin Dadd, 49-year-old Marine reservist activated back on November 1st, and Major Doreen Berger. She has been a reservist since 1976, and she was activated just last week. And good morning to the two of you.
Good morning.
Major Berger, I'm just wondering what your thoughts are as we watch Operation Desert Storm unfold.
I guess I have the trepidation that everybody else has watching the news. Currently, I'm working on the casual assistance hotline at headquarters, and so that even increases my anxiety about what is going on. But, you know, I'm hopeful that everything will be completed very soon and our troops can get back home.
And Colonel Dadd, you in fact served in Vietnam. What are your thoughts now?
Well, it's definitely not a Vietnam in any stretch of imagination, at least from my perspective. The amount of training that's gone into this, the professionalism of the people involved. I'm talking about the use of reserves and National Guard. These are not draftees with limited training. They've had a lot of training, a lot of commitment, very clear objectives, and tremendous amount of support from the country, which just means so much to them. So I don't see it as Vietnam again. It's a totally different thing today.
Major Berger, you're like many who are serving right now. You have 3 children, a 5-year-old, a 7-year-old, a 9-year-old. Your husband is also on active duty now.
Yes, he is.
Do your children have any sense of what might happen and the fact that you may end up going over there?
I think right now, being little boys, they see things in terms of black and white, the good guys and the bad guys, and it's very hard to show them that there's areas of gray. I think they know, let you know, that Mommy is working right now locally, and we try to take it one step at a time. We don't even, you know, we told them that right now that's not what's happening, and we don't even discuss the possibility with them. We cross each bridge as we come to it.
Major Berger and Colonel Dadd, thank you both for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
Our thoughts are with you. We'll be right back. And we're back now. Earlier on, Harry reported that a downed U.S. pilot reportedly has been captured by Iraq. We have a little more information now. We are told out of Amman that Jordanian television now says they do expect to get a picture of that captured pilot out of Baghdad. Once again, these are unconfirmed reports, so we really at this point don't know exactly what we're looking at.
So, to our knowledge, 7 Allied planes are down. 3 of those planes are American planes. There are 2 British Tornadoes, 1 Kuwaiti plane, and 1 Italian plane that have been down thus far, but we haven't gotten too much close to a more elaborate casualty report from the Defense Department or from Saudi Arabia, other than there was some artillery fire that went into Saudi Arabia late yesterday, and 3 Americans were injured just slightly from that artillery fire that came in from Iraq and Kuwait. 2 Marines and 1 Navy corpsman, and apparently their injuries were quite minimal. We'll keep an eye on this report about the pilots being captured in Baghdad, and if we get anything close to a confirmation or anything like more suitable information, we'll provide it to you.
There's another report circulating right now that's piquing our interest, and once again, we're not sure exactly what to make of it, and that is that Saddam Hussein's family has fled to Mauritania. His wife and 3 of his children. Now, earlier it had been reported that some family members had in fact gone to Geneva, Switzerland. Once again, these are initial reports, and we will keep you up to date on those as we get more solid information.
We're going to talk for a minute or 2 right now with Frank Gaffney down in Washington, a foreign affairs specialist and someone we have had the opportunity to chat with on and off over the last couple of weeks with. Frank, good morning.
Good morning, Harry.
First off, there's this kind of wild card report this morning that the Soviets want to take some sort of diplomatic end run to end the war, and that they may be trying to put in some sort of proposition at the United Nations. What do you make of that? And is there any credibility to that whatsoever that you know of?
Well, I can't confirm the report, Harry, but it would make perfect sense from the Soviet point of view. I think that the war has achieved their immediate objective, which was, in fact, to create a distraction from the crackdown that they have underway, which we talked about last week. That said, I think they don't want to see their strategically valuable client, Saddam Hussein, put in any greater jeopardy than is absolutely necessary. So I think they've played a double game up to this point, and I think that's going on now. It may prove very difficult indeed at this point if the report proves to be true.
Frank, if in fact the Soviets float a plan, do you have any idea of what that plan might consist of?
I don't, Paula. I think that what we must expect is some variation on the original theme, which was first advanced, I think, by Secretary Baker and then revised and improved upon by Perez de Cuellar and has been further discussed by others. The short form of it is, I think, some sort of indication that no further attacks would take place against Iraq proper if Iraq agrees to withdraw from Kuwait. Commitments perhaps that reparations and war crimes and so on would not be pressed against Saddam Hussein or his troops, that there would be an opportunity for a negotiated arrangement whereby Iraq and Kuwait could try to sort out their differences. In other words, to give Saddam a chance to get the territorial concessions and oil concessions that he's been seeking, and perhaps most importantly of all, apart from a lifting of the embargo, presumably, would be the acquiescence in an early convening of an international peace conference designed to force Israel to make its own territorial concessions to the Palestinians.
Let's talk about the bigger picture of what has transpired over there thus far. Give us your own assessment of everything you've seen. There was an initial rush of positive feelings as there was so much success with sorties across into Iraq and into Baghdad, and I think a lot of people felt like maybe the wind was taken out of their sails a little bit when those Scuds landed in Tel Aviv and Haifa last night.
Well, I think there's good news and bad news. The good news is that the United States government and its allies proceeded to address the strategic objectives and I think the strategic causes of the present crisis, which is to say, not who holds title to Kuwait at the moment, but rather the character of the regime in Iraq and the weapons and capabilities at its disposal. If that is continued, and if we pursue it successfully, I think we will achieve both the liberation of Kuwait and the longer-term objective of greater stability in the region. Now, the bad news is, of course, that there have been some responses from Iraq. But I think by any measure, Harry, we've got to take great pride in the fact that the technology, the strategy, and above all, the people that we've put to this test have minimized those to an extraordinary degree.
The other thing that's interesting this morning, people have talked so much about how fragile this coalition is. The Saudis made it very, very clear today that if in fact Israel decided to respond to the attack against them, the Scud missile attack last night, that they wouldn't be allowed to be dragged into splitting up the coalition or take any retaliation against Israel, which would be a sort of a normal and or perhaps predictable quote-unquote Arab response, as they're a long time enemy of Israel.
Well, again, I think that's a very positive development. I personally thought it an entirely predictable one, and I'm afraid that the fear-mongering that's taken place, that they would do otherwise, against all logic, given their precarious and exposed position, was such as to prevent some coordination between the United States and Israel that might have further minimized the damage that Israel has already experienced. And I would just say on that, if I may, very quickly, Harry.
Frank, we're out of time. I'm sorry. Frank Gaffney, thank you so much.
morning, everybody. Here are the headlines in our continuing coverage today. A downed American pilot is reported captured by Iraq. Saddam Hussein's family reportedly flees Iraq to safety. And the Pentagon says it appears Israel will use restraint after an Iraqi missile attack. A total of 3 American warplanes have now been downed in the Gulf War. An Iraqi civilian says he saw 1 U.S. flyer captured. There is no word on who the pilot might be or what aircraft he was flying, but he's said to have appeared to be uninjured. The first plane lost the first night of the war was a single-seat Navy F-18 Hornet. Its pilot, Lieutenant Michael Spicer, is officially listed as missing. Also down, another Navy attack plane, an A-6 Intruder with a 2-man crew, and an Air Force jet, an F-15E Strike Eagle, also with a crew of 2. Both crews are also reported missing. Despite some bad weather in the Gulf today, Allied warplanes have launched a new wave of attacks on Iraq, reportedly hitting hard at downtown Baghdad. At a briefing in Saudi Arabia, the U.S. Gulf Commander, General Norman Schwarzkopf, had little good to say about Iraqi air defenses.
What we have seen is when they've come up and engaged, we tend to shoot them down if they persist in the engagement. Normally they break off when our fire control radars lock onto them and flee to the north.
There is an unconfirmed report today that Saddam Hussein's family has now fled Baghdad to the West African country of Mauritania. And while Israeli jets patrolled their own skies after last night's Scud missile attack that injured at least 10 people, the Pentagon says this morning that Israel seems prepared to use restraint in responding to that missile attack to help keep the anti-Iraq alliance together. Now we go live to Tel Aviv, where Tom Fenton is standing by with a late report. Tom, what is the indication you get there? Will Israel retaliate?
The cabinet has met for most of the day. First the full cabinet and then the small war cabinet. Now there's been no official report. Most of us assume that the answer, if there is going to be an answer to the Iraqis, will be delivered in Baghdad and not to the press. But I can tell you this much from informed observers. The cabinet is waiting to see how efficient the American attacks, the second wave of American strikes, have been, whether they have eliminated most of the rest of the missiles that survived the initial attack. After that, it will depend on their evaluation of the possibility of a second attack. Now, most observers think that the government will absorb one attack at the most, but not a second attack. So if there is a second wave of attacks tonight, and I have to tell you that most of the decision makers and the military seem to expect a second wave tonight, then they have little doubt that Israel will respond to that.
So if in fact they're expecting a second wave of missile attacks, what are they doing to get their people prepared for that possibility?
Well, the people have been prepared ever since the first wave of attacks. People are still at home. They're supposed to be near their safe room. They're supposed to have their chemical warfare equipment ready. They were told they could go out today and shop, but it is now the Sabbath. It is now night, and almost everyone's at home. I didn't see a cat on the streets of Tel Aviv when I came from the hotel to here. People are ready as this country could be for this sort of surprise attack.
It was harrowing to watch you last night as the attacks came down. I'm wondering if you can give us any sense at all of any kind of reaction. I know you're reporting the city is very quiet right now, but have you been able to monitor any kind of reaction?
Well, I don't think people are gloomy. Usually you get in a situation like this some sort of a rally round syndrome. If there's any reaction, people are nicer to each other. They're more helpful. Israelis are not always nice to each other. It's just like New Yorkers and anyone else. I think people they've seen that this is not a terrible weapon. The problem is that conventional warheads were used the first time, and there is still the possibility that Saddam Hussein, for whatever reason, might try to use chemical warfare. Now, that's an entirely different kettle of fish.
How real is that fear?
Well, I think it's pretty real. I mean, after all, Saddam Hussein said he would attack Israel. He did attack Israel. He has threatened to burn this country, to wipe it off the face of the earth, and he has used chemical weapons before on his own people, so I think that's a very real threat.
Tom Fenton reporting from Tel Aviv. Thank you very much. And now we're going to turn our attention to Syria, which of course is one of our partners in the coalition, and Bert Quint now has this report from Damascus.
There's no great sense of tension in Damascus on this first Muslim weekend of war. Regular Friday prayers, a keen interest, and some delight deep down in the hearts of a few of the more politically concerned in the fact that two of Syria's enemies are getting hurt. Some have fled the capital, just in case. There have even been instances of Syrians sending their families across the border, of all places, to Lebanon to get them out of the way if this country gets caught up in the conflict. But the Syrian government seems determined to keep out of it. The 15,000 Syrian troops in Saudi Arabia were sent there to defend the Desert Kingdom, not, the Syrians have made it clear, to invade anybody, especially not a fellow Arab nation. And even now that the Iraqis have involved Israel by hitting it with missiles, it's still, not yet at least, Syria's war. If Israel were to send planes over this country to strike at Iraq, Syria would have to react. But that reaction could be limited to pursuit or challenge in the air, incidents, not war. The danger lies in the possibility of an Israeli move on the ground toward Iraq through Jordan. Arab pride and politics could force President Hafez al-Assad to send his troops, already massed on the Jordanian border, into action. That seems unlikely now, but people in the Middle East have found in the past that war has its own dynamics. And as one observer here puts it, it's easy enough to make an omelet out of an egg, but not even the shrewdest politician can make an egg from an omelet. Paula?
Thank you, Bert. And that's the latest for now. Harry?
Let's take a little bit of a check on some of the heartbeat of the country right now. I like to refer to call-in talk shows on radio stations around the country as a kind of the electronic back fence, and we want to get a little bit of a view from Dallas this morning from one of the country's talk show hosts, David Gold. David, can you hear me all right?
I sure can, Harry. How are you?
Good to talk to you again.
Good to talk to you.
What are your listeners saying in response to the war that's started almost 2 days old now?
Well, Harry, obviously it's been like a roller coaster, and it's been very difficult for our listeners to respond. It's been like a bad movie for a lot of people. It's been very intense and very emotional. But for the most part, people are overwhelming in their support of President Bush and what he's been doing, and quite put out, frankly, with a lot of the anti-war protesters. We're hearing an awful lot of that.
Are you surprised to see how overwhelmingly positive the polls are showing? Amazing support for the president. His approval rating is now over 85%.
I'm really not surprised, Harry. I guess that is fundamentally what normally happens in a situation like this. And couple that with the fact that things seem to have gone very successfully. I think the other night, your own Andy Rooney asked people whether they wanted their money back from what we had spent on our military preparedness over the 80s. Well, I think people are saying loud and clear, this is where our money went, and it seems to have been spent very well.
Dallas has traditionally been a pretty conservative part of the country, and I know you run a pretty conservative radio show down there. Any other responses surprised you in all of the people who have called over the last couple of days?
Well, you know, Harry, first of all, I don't think we see this in terms of liberal and conservative. Up until the actual strike the other night, conservatives have had questions, as liberals have had questions over this policy. But now, once this thing had been engaged, I think overwhelmingly people have come behind this. But I want to get back to the response that people have to people in the streets who have been demonstrating. This has been at least 1 out of every 2 or 3 callers that we've had. And I think it's important that people understand that people will call and say these people have the right to demonstrate their anti-war views. That's fine. But I think people are saying that these people are a tiny minority of people. In my opinion, personally, they are professional demonstrators who trash America at every opportunity. This is nothing new. And that the media has a responsibility to explain that these are people who will, in fact, be out on the streets on the last vestiges of daddy's tuition checks anytime, any place, anywhere.
David Gold from KLIF in Dallas, thank you very much for taking the time to chat with us this morning. A little bit of another slice of reaction from around the country this morning.
And right now we're going to turn our focus to the economic news of the day. We've heard a little bit about how the financial markets are reacting to the second 24 hours of this operation. Ray Brady joins us now. We saw the market go cuckoo yesterday, the Dow Jones at least. What's happening now?
Well, it's gone from cuckoo yesterday to quiet today, Paula. The market has been up 4 or 5 points at one point. It's been down 4 or 5 points. Really, basically not very much going on, a very slow market. And one of the brokers I talked to said, in fact, that the trading is so slow that if you look up at the ticker tape, you can count the numbers as they go by. So they're just walking by, whereas usually they run madly like they did yesterday.
I was surprised to hear when Richard Schlesinger was on earlier that he was saying analysts expected investors to act like real grown-ups through this, and I guess by that he meant to be very cautious. That's in fact what you're seeing.
Yes, that's right. They've gotten very cautious today after all that wild euphoria yesterday, and I think like most Americans, they're waiting to see what's going to happen next. Now, several of them are very optimistic because they feel that if Saddam Hussein really wanted to go to war against Israel, he would have hit them harder. But remember, we're talking about financial people, not military people. And they sort of put their military hats on at times like this. But
it surprises me because I want to go back to what you just talked about, that idea that you can ask people in that business to act responsibly because I guess not historically, if we want to go back years and years, but over the last several years, even as caution has been urged, as sort of people in that kind of business do really what they want to do and not what somebody suggests them to do.
Well, it's psychological, a lot of it, and you know, two things really move the stock market: fear and greed. And yesterday, I think we kind of saw, greed. Today, maybe we're seeing caution with a little fear mixed in with it. And yesterday was very strange because at the beginning of every other war, stock prices have gone down, commodity prices have gone up. Yesterday was just the opposite.
Do you think we were looking then at a one-day aberration?
Well, that's what some people are saying, but you never can tell in the stock market. I mean, you just can't take one day and say this is it. One of the biggest surprises of all, of course, was that huge drop in crude oil yesterday. I mean, down $10 and some cents.
Can you explain to us what happened? Because the day didn't start out that way, and then we kept on seeing this precipitous drop.
You want to really know what happened?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, a lot of people all around the world had loaded up on oil because they said, look, there's going to be a war, the price is going to go sky high. And I can't describe it. Tankers at sea are loaded with the stuff. Tank farms everywhere are loaded with the stuff. All of a sudden yesterday, they thought, well, the price is not going to go higher. It started down. They all owned so much oil they couldn't get out of it fast enough, and that's why that price just dropped the way it did.
All right. Thank you, Ray.
Ray Brady, thank you very much. We're going to take a break right now, but we will come back with continuing coverage of Operation Desert Storm.
Today, leading health authorities urge us to eat foods rich in beta-carotene. Today, Centrum is enriched with beta-carotene and more complete than any leading brand. Centrum with beta-carotene, more complete from A to zinc.
LensCrafters made my state-of-the-art glasses in just under an hour, so I could see better and perform better fast.
LensCrafters puts the whole lab right in the store to custom craft your top quality glasses in about an hour. Call LensCrafters at 1-800-522-LENS.
Someone should talk to you about how much time you spend on the phone, and who you talk to, and when and where. A Sprint representative can easily help you select a savings plan for your personal calling needs, and Sprint has better overall savings than AT&T. So there's a plan that's perfect for you, unless of course you're a teenager. I can't believe it. No one's invented the perfect plan for that.
From Walt Disney Pictures, on the Alaskan frontier, where nature is man's greatest challenge. A boy rescues a baby wolf.
What chance would a wolf cub have of surviving on his own out here?
None. And as they grow, they form an extraordinary friendship.
We're gonna be okay.
Walt Disney Pictures presents a classic adventure. Jack London's White Fang, rated PG. Now playing at a theater near you.
Our coverage continues now with a look at the headlines at this hour. An unconfirmed report that a U.S. pilot has been captured in Iraq. The Allied bombing runs continue, that is, at a blistering pace against Saddam Hussein. And there is word that Hussein's family, Saddam that is, have fled to safety in West Africa. And a leading U.S. senator says it appears Israel will hold off retaliation for last night's Iraqi missile attack. The Reuters news service is reporting that an Iraqi taxi driver says he saw a downed U.S. pilot in Iraqi captivity. There is no confirmation of this report, although the U.S. admits 3 of the American fighters have been down in the fighting. The Defense Department released videotape of precision U.S. bombing runs made in the first hours of the attack on Saddam Hussein. And one senator says the war effort is going very well.
We couldn't be more pleased as to what we've seen. As the Senate yesterday in a top secret briefing was told hour by hour as to what had occurred and how it had been delivered and how 5 million tons of ordnance had been delivered into this country. There was just a silence.
Simpson's Senate colleague Strom Thurmond says this morning that he's learned from the Pentagon that Israel will not retaliate for last night's Scud missile attacks on Tel Aviv and other cities. That unless there is another round of Iraqi attacks. That's it from here.
That's the headlines for, at least for this moment. We want to talk for a couple of minutes with Fuad Ajami, a longtime CBS News consultant, professor at Johns Hopkins.
Good morning.
Good morning again. The world is kind of waiting as nightfall has once again come to the Middle East to see what else time may bring and what other surprises Saddam Hussein may have up his sleeve. The war thus far has gone extraordinarily well in terms of the Allies being able to strike the targets they want to. They haven't, of course, knocked off all of the missile sites they've intended. But one sees thus far that this will be will last less time than a longer time. Let's talk about what happens once Saddam Hussein may, in fact, say, "Okay, I'm going to wave the white flag and I'll clear out of Kuwait."
Well, the report I love is about the despot's family making it to West Africa. If indeed this is true, this tells you something about the nature of dictatorship. You always feather a nest abroad. And you talk about willing to fight to the finish, and you talk about Samson, and you talk about this, that you're willing to commit suicide. But we know one thing about Saddam Hussein: he's homicidal, but not suicidal. And that at the end, indeed, if it comes to this, that he will make a run for it. And that's what we're waiting for, this Iraqi state to crack. That really is what this whole business is about.
Do you see it cracking?
Well, I don't know. I think what's interesting about the state is you take a look at Saddam's own state, for all his talk about colonialism, creating borders in the Middle East and creating phony states, and about Kuwait being a phony state and it's only a family-owned enterprise. But so is his state. So is his state. That this too was a state that at the end there is the isolation of the man at the helm, and there is this Sunni Arab community to which he belongs, and then in the far north there is this Kurdish population which is hoping and praying for the state to come apart, and then there is this Shia population in the south which loathes Saddam. So there is no love lost, and it has always been the state put together by sheer tyranny. And the test of states like this comes in the battlefield. And we know one thing, I think now we're going to be prey to all kinds of rumors. Truth and war are not good friends. Truth and war in the Middle East are particularly bad companions. I myself remember when I was 22 years old during the Six-Day War, I still own this newspaper. I still have kept it. It's a newspaper headline. It's called Intasarna, which means we won the war. This was when the Arabs were being defeated, when the air force of the Egyptians was shattered and completely destroyed on the ground. We were told that the Egyptians were winning the war, and that Tel Aviv was itself being destroyed. So we will have to wait and see and sift this story out.
One of the things I thought was interesting last night is word came in that Scud missiles had hit Israel, and Mike Wallace was sitting across the desk then, and he said that the tips on the warheads of the missile were not, the payload wasn't important so much in terms of whether it was chemical or nerve gas or whatever, that the tips were in fact political.
I love this. This was absolute truth.
What is interesting to me is that if in fact that was a political message that was being sent, or political damage that he hoped to incur, there has been none so far.
Right, well, this was a message from Saddam. We had wanted the Israelis to take a low profile in this crisis, and low profile in Israel are almost a contradiction in terms, but they obliged us. But instead, Saddam wanted to give them a starring role. He wanted a starring role for the Israelis because that's, in the end, Saddam realized that you cannot win a military confrontation with the Americans. But perhaps if you go into the old story of the Arab world, the Arab-Israeli story, there you may have your chance. Saddam created his own slogan, and Saddam created his own phantom. It's the phantom of Arab nationalism. The Arab world is very deeply divided, very deeply different, but he's created this illusion. And his illusion was, once he transforms into an Arab-Israeli war, then he can emerge intact. I think he will be disappointed.
Yeah, the Saudi Arabians spit the bait out, as a matter of fact, this morning.
Earlier you used the analogy that war and truth really aren't good friends. What is it that Saddam Hussein could conceivably be telling his people right now?
I think Saddam Hussein, for example, that some of the dispatches from Iraq say we've downed 65, 70 enemy aircraft. Tomorrow there'll be 200 or 300. He could also tell them that there is great divisions in the Arab world. Some few gullible souls may demonstrate in Algeria. This will become the Arab world is about to rise and throw out the infidels. Some Muslims demonstrated in Ethiopia. This would again be reported as the coming of a great storm that's going to uproot all his enemies. They are at the mercy of his own propaganda. They have no access to the outside world. He is the warden. He tells them, he feeds them, he tells them what the world looks like, and they are left to judge for themselves.
There's no real way to know this, I guess, but I know that Allied forces have already started dropping leaflets over these hundreds of thousands of soldiers that he's deployed. Some of them real, honest-to-goodness soldiers, the Republican Guard, as they're called, and the rest of the conscriptees that may have been in a farm field as recently as two weeks ago. What kind of a response, if you're standing out there and getting the Jesus beat out of you, are you going to have when a piece of paper comes floating down?
I think these pieces of paper are not insignificant. They're an attempt to give them another source of information, because the Iraqi soldiers have two choices: either death at the hands of the enemy or a sure death were they to break with Saddam. So, being reasonable men, as we all are, in the end they make their choices to submit to this man. But should the opportunity to flee or to crack becomes available to them, that's when we know what his army is all about.
So, Fouad Ajami, thank you so much for taking the chat with us.
Very quickly, the Pentagon is now releasing the names of the U.S. military personnel now listed as missing: Michael Spiker, Lieutenant Robert Wetzel, and Lieutenant Jeffrey Zaun. That's all for Harry Smith and me. Charles Kuralt and Connie Chung will continue our CBS News reporting of Operation Desert Storm at the top of the hour with live coverage of President Bush's press briefing. Thanks for joining us throughout the morning.
Hi, this is Steve Croft. I'm with retired Air Force General Mike Dugan, former Air Force Chief of Staff. General Dugan, we've been looking most of the morning at a lot of videotape of very sophisticated U.S. weapons knocking out selected Iraqi targets. How much of the job would you guess at this point has been done?
Well, there's a whole complex of target sets. One of the key target sets that we're looking after is the Iraqi Air Force itself. And I judge that perhaps the effectiveness of the Iraqi Air Force has been reduced by 50%.
Would you say that means that maybe 50% of the planes have been knocked out?
Well, some of them aren't in commission to begin with, and so, I mean, even if one's operating in normal conditions, 15 or 20% don't work, but if you destroy them or you damage and whatnot, another 30%, then you're down about 50% left. And I'd say that, in general, the output of the Iraqi Air Force is at half of the level that we would have expected when we started.
A good deal of the planes, a fair number of the planes, have been hidden from U.S. attacks in what's called hardened shelters. How would you describe this, and do we know where they are, and how difficult are they to knock out?
Yes, we know where they're at. You can see hardened shelters from satellite photography. They're concrete structures, reinforced. They're built very thick, feet of concrete. I've seen some of the real shelters in that vicinity of the world, And indeed, they're formidable structures. And if you put several airplanes in them, they can be attacked. And they can be attacked with systems like we saw in today's morning show. And 2,000-pound bombs will make a considerable amount of damage to a hardened shelter. But you don't know if there's any airplanes in each of the shelters. And there are a lot of shelters. And it's, in some regards, a shell game. And so while it's important to do that, they're not at the top, I believe, of General Horner's list of critical targets to take out early on. He puts craters in the middle of the runways because that shuts off that runway, and that shuts off perhaps 15 airplanes for the next couple of days until the Iraqis fix that. Later on, as he gets down to working off his high-priority targets, he may go back to a shelter busting game where he can kill them one at a time. But for right now, I don't think he's adopted that kind of a strategy.
Let's say that we've knocked out 50% of the Iraqi planes. What kind of a capability does that leave the Iraqi Air Force with? And how would you expect them to use that 50% capability?
Well, it appears that they have already decided not to flush and not to come up in large numbers and challenge the coalition partners in the air. And it appears that they have adopted a strategy of sheltering their assets for the initial game. I say game reservedly, but in fact it is an exercise in the odds. And how does one improve the odds? And it would appear that they said to themselves, the American forces, the coalition forces, are going to fly a lot of sorties the first few days, maybe the first week. After that, they will have used up some of their supplies, they use up some of their ordnance, they'll be tired. They'll only fly at a lesser rate after that. My probability of living will go down if you only fly half the number of sorties next week than what you're flying this week. I'll challenge you next week.
Do you think that's an effective strategy? And what are those planes likely to face when they go up, let's say, against Americans next week if we're only flying half the number of sorties?
Yeah, I don't think it's an effective strategy, but it may be more effective than any other strategy given the quality of their pilots, given the quality of their airplanes, given the relative numbers they have.
Why isn't it an effective strategy?
They just have a terrible problem. They have a problem that they're not sufficiently capable of dealing with. They're going to lose.
So far, it seems like they have really not used their Air Force much at all, that they've done everything they possibly can to protect it. How would you, if you were running the Iraqi Air Force, use it? How would you get the maximum effort? Would you fly, let's say, a suicide mission against U.S. bases? Or we've heard a lot about Exocet missiles, which we know them to have. Why haven't they used them against the fleets? Why haven't they?
I think that, in fact, they're preserving their resources for one or two of those kinds, not one or two, but small numbers of those kinds of spectacular missions where they get not only military effect, but some kind of a political effect. So I don't count them out. 50% is still a significant force. They do have Exocet missiles that have been very painful for U.S. forces in the past, and we'll see some of those kinds of assets used, and we need to be on guard.
Do they have the capability to launch a chemical weapons attack with fighter bombers?
They probably do. It does not take a sophisticated kind of shell to put chemicals in, but it is essentially a relatively small amount of chemicals. It would be a suicide kind of mission because our defenses are still in good shape in every regard. And but it's one of those kinds of spectacular kinds of attacks that one might be hoarding his assets to try to accomplish someplace downstream.
Major Dugan, thank you very much for talking to us. We're having a shift change right now, and in a matter of seconds, we're going to go to Charles Kuralt and to Connie Chung.
This is CBS.
McDonald Carey's amazing tell-all book, only on Entertainment Tonight.
Just because you're all grown up, don't think Gerber forgot about you. Now those nutrition folks at Gerber have created an easy way to get the fiber you know you need. New Juice and More. A delicious grown-up juice made from fresh pressed apples with more soluble fiber in one glass than 2 bowls of oatmeal.
Come here, you.
New Juice and More from Gerber. There's a lot more to it than juice.
It was a time for change, a time for shattering illusions, and one man's dream became a nation's struggle, a fight for racial equality, a fight for justice for all. 30 years later, the struggle continues. Join us as we look back at the relentless pursuit of one man's dream, a dream that has changed many things. But has it changed our attitudes?
I have a dream.
Due to the coverage of war in the Persian Gulf, Talk of the Town will not be seen at 11. Please stay tuned now for the News Channel 5 Midday Report with Roy Hobbs.
This is the News Channel 5 Midday Report with Roy Hobbs.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Midday Report. It's Friday, January 18th, and America remains at war.
Finding the mobile launchers is like finding a needle in a haystack, as you can well imagine.
Will Iraq's attack on Israel escalate America's war in the Gulf? And some Middle Tennessee students take on the anti-war protesters. We'll have all those stories and more for you in just a moment. But first, let's check in now with Joe Case and find out about the forecast today, Joe.
All right, a quick check of our satellite picture this hour showing some